Hello YouTube. In every budget tech YouTuber, there is the urge to cover the GTX 750 Ti. After all, it's been a staple of budget gaming for years now. Since I do have one on my hands, let's get this out of the way at the start of my YouTube journey. As mentioned, the GPU we will have a look at today is no short of legendary in terms of legacy, probably sits there as one of the most recognizable GPUs, and that is for a good reason. Released back in 2014 for $149 MSRP, it was plain and simple a great deal. Being built as part of the Maxwell architecture, it ended up receiving driver updates for 11 years, which is just astonishing in my eyes. In terms of specs, we are looking at GM107 core with 640 CUDA cores, 40 texture mapping units and 16 ROPs, all clocking away at 1020 MHz base clock. However, thanks to it being a Maxwell card, it features GPU boost, which boosts the clocks higher depending on power available, temperatures and load. The boost clock is 1085 MHz standard, but cards can boost over that provided the circumstances are favorable. The chip is quite small and is built with 28nm node using TSMC as manufacturer. Supporting the core, we have 2GB of GDDR5 memory, clocking away at 1350 MHz. While not much nowadays, back in 2014 it was plenty and as mentioned helped it pave its way to being a legendary cheap gaming GPU. There were also versions with 1GB and 4GB of memory, but they're much less common. All of that is bus powered with GPU having TDP of 60 watts, however there were a few additions which featured a 6-pin supplementary power for overclocking. Our sample today is MSI Low Profile Edition with 2GB of RAM. It is super tiny but still packs a punch. It is single slot card and would be perfect for a cheap pre-build which might have an iffy power supply and little space to work with. Since we want to see it perform its best, we will also include overclocked results. The core was not the most stable, but we were still able to lift it by 163 MHz, resulting in 1325 MHz core clock. The math may be weirdly off, but as mentioned, cards boost higher provided favorable conditions, and we made the geezer as happy as it could be. The memory we were able to raise to 1500 MHz, with the double data rate in mind, we got effective speed of 3000 MHz. So how will it fare in 2026? We'll have a look for yourself with the pre-selected games and benchmarks. Starting with CS2, we see a decent experience running at 1080p, low settings and no upscaling, averaging 93.8 FPS and achieving 48.8 FPS at 1% low over the Dust2 benchmark. Overclocked, we do see a rise to 105.1 FPS for average and 55.4 FPS for 1% low. This is not a bad way to play the game in my honest opinion if you do pugs. Definitely not ideal for Faceit in higher elo but still passable. With a dab of FSR or roll resolution, you should achieve even better frame rates. After that we tried War Thunder. Using 1080p resolution with high preset we averaged 49.4 FPS with lows at 29.1 and 5.2 FPS for 1% and 0.1% respectively. Overclock resulted with average very close to 60 FPS and lows at 46 and 11.7 FPS. I don't play War Thunder enough to give you a proper answer if it's enough for competitive play, but I had fun using this card in this game, so you probably can do too. Euro Truck Simulator 2 didn't give our card too many problems. With 1080p resolution and high preset we achieved 40.1 FPS on average, with 26.1 FPS 1% low and 21.9 FPS 0.1% low. Overclock helped us a bit but was not enough to change the experience. Our average rose to 45.5 FPS and our lows improved to 32.4 FPS and 31.2 FPS respectively. To me this is a great result and I could put loads of hours all in like this, although a steering wheel to make this game proper enjoyable would definitely set you back more than the GPU itself. Following that, we tried Witcher 3. We know that it can run the DX11 version quite comfortably. What about DX12 version? Well, it's not that amazing, but definitely you could play through the game here. With 1080p low preset we see an average of 32.8 FPS with lows of 25.1 for 1% and 8.9 FPS for 0.1% low. Once again, overclock helps us a little to make it 35.7 FPS average, 1% low of 28.8 FPS and 0.1% low of 10.7 FPS. Definitely playable, but I would say stick with the DX11 and enjoy higher frames and better visuals. GTA 5 Legacy is still the more popular edition, but gap is closing with each day. With that edition of the game, we run it with 1080p resolution with high settings the game defaulted to, with FXAA enabled. These settings allowed 750 Ti to achieve 68.2 FPS on average, while stock lows were not bad either at 50.6 FPS and 48.2 FPS for 1% and 0.1% lows respectively. Overclock yet again gives us a small boost across the board, with it the average had risen to 73.7 FPS, 1% low to 58.8 and 0.1% low to 53.5 FPS, definitely more than playable. GTA Online on the other hand is as unpredictable as always. Stock we were playing in 27 player lobby, so quite populated. This allowed us to achieve 63.3 FPS average across our playtime. Our lows were placed at 45 FPS for 1% low and 29.4 FPS for 0.1% low. Overclock has sadly done jack all for us. We tested overclock in a 28 player lobby and our average was 59.8 FPS, so lower than before, and our lows were not too dissimilar from non-OC results, 44.8 FPS for 1% low and 33.4 FPS for 0.1% low. Hogwarts Legacy really is showing the limitation that this cat has, lack of VRAM. Because of this, we experienced severe stutters and you could see how game is struggling and having to load lower LOD version of assets. That being said, the benchmark was run with 1080p low preset and FSR free set to quality. I did try to lower it down to even ultra performance, but it really made no difference whatsoever. The game achieved 18.9 FPS average while stock, with lows in the bin. Overclock did raise our average by quite a bit to 28.7 FPS, but the lows were still very low. Civilization 6 was more than playable. The built-in benchmark showed us 59.8 FPS average with 1% low at 46.9 FPS, all at 1080p resolution with medium preset. Overclock returned 69.9 FPS average and 52.4 FPS 1% low. More than enough in my opinion and high enough to warrant turning the settings a notch higher. Minecraft Java gave us great results with 1080p resolution and fabulous settings. Rendering 12 chunks, we saw an average FPS of 133.8, with 1% low being 20.3 FPS and 0.1% low being 6.8 FPS. Decent enough for gaming as it is, but Overclock came in once again with a small yet nice improvement to our average, making it 143.9 FPS, and our lows also saw an improvement to 81.2 FPS for 1% low and 26.5 FPS for 1.1% low. With Optifine you're bound to get even more performance. Fortnite was really a victory royale for our 750 Ti in my books, even though I failed to make it happen for it. Using our regular settings, which are 1080p performance renderer with low details and epic view distance, we managed to snag 83.4 FPS average with lows at 48.2 FPS for 1% low and 13.8 FPS for 0.1% low. Overclock gave us also a decent boost to our averages, with it landing at 104 FPS, with our lows rising to 55.9 FPS and 24.9 FPS. All in all, Fortnite is more than playable on this GPU, even going into 2026. Of course, after the fun comes a bit of math. We have our usual benchmarks, starting off with Unigine Heaven. We scored 1101 points stock, and overclocked that figure rose to 1228 points. Superposition gave us more modest score of 800 points when stock. Applying our overclock allowed us to reach 892 points, so a solid improvement, although less than what we would hope for. Firestrike marked our 750 Ti with 4,522 points for graphics score while stock, and 5,127 points while overclocked. Its younger brother, Time Spy, marked as way lower. Graphics score for stock was 1263 points and 1417 for the overclocked one. So how is 750 Ti in 2026? Well, it's usable and for simple titles still enough, but we do see that it's losing ground quickly. Firstly, because it now is on legacy drivers, and secondly, because it does lack VRAM for the newest titles as evidenced by Hogwarts Legacy. Sure, it was pretty much certain this will happen at some point. I'm very impressed though by the sheer resilience it has. Imagine going into 2014, spending just $150 on a graphics card and using it 12 years later without any problems. I think that's very impressive, speaks volumes about how just good it is and how bad current prices are. Would I recommend buying one though? Well, it really depends on the pricing. For under $15, maybe, but above that we are so close to RX 470 for 8 area that it's really pointless to go for 750 Ti. For a retro PC though, I would say this is still a great choice. It still has all the legacy features you would want, compatibility isn't broken and has a decent Windows XP support. There is also the power draw consideration, but if you really need to save up power because PSU or space constraints, maybe a 1050 or possibly even 1050 Ti may be occupying similar market in your local area and offers superior performance. That is pretty much all I had prepared for us today. Thank you for sticking with me while we had a look at 750 Ti in 2026. Feel free to watch any other of my videos which should be on the screen now, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.